Father.
Flames move across the ground. The air shimmers with heat. A man falls to his knees, dust rises, trembling in the light. Before him stands a radiant figure, wrapped in fire and glory. The world is silent, except for one word: Father. Why would God pray? If Jesus truly is God incarnate, why does he bow his head? Is he speaking to himself or to someone beyond the veil of time? And if the sinless one needed to pray, what does that say about us? You've wondered this before, maybe not out loud, but in the quiet moments when your prayers felt unanswered. Does God really hear me? If Jesus already knew all things, why did he still cry out in anguish? Why does heaven sometimes feel silent when we need it most? Tonight, we return to the beginning, before Bethlehem, before creation, before time itself, to uncover why the Son spoke to the Father, and what that moment reveals about love, obedience, and the eternal relationship that holds the universe together. By the end of this journey, you'll see exactly why Jesus prayed and what his prayer reveals about the very heartbeat of God. Welcome to Bible Stories and Mysteries. Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell, because what you're about to hear could change the way you see prayer forever. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 1:1. The air hums. Light throbs like a heartbeat. You feel heat on your cheeks and the ground seems to breathe. Somewhere beyond sight, a voice moves across the dark like wind over water. If everything stopped right now, if time fell silent in your hands, who would you hear speaking first? Many have feared they misunderstood Jesus. Many wonder if prayer means God is far or if it means he is closer than breath. By the end of this journey, you will see exactly why Jesus prayed, what it reveals about your eternal destiny, and how his prayers change what happens after death. Welcome to Bible Stories and Mysteries. Like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. John 1:1. Before stars learned their names, the Word already lived within a communion older than light. Not a lonely silence, not a cold infinity, but a living fellowship. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Love speaking to love. Glory answering glory. The Son did not arrive as a late visitor to history. He is the radiance behind every sunrise you have ever seen, the reason anything sings at all. Here is the thesis. Jesus prays on earth because he has always lived in relationship, not isolation. Imagine a sea of glass before a throne, not empty or still, but alive with warmth and mutual delight. Think of three torches whose fires do not consume each other. The Son faces the Father without beginning or end. He receives and reflects. He pours and is poured into. When he enters Bethlehem, he does not learn prayer as a new language. He carries it with him like a native tongue. Breathe that in for a moment. If prayer were only a human rope thrown upward into outer darkness, Jesus would not need it. But prayer is first a river flowing within God. On earth, he simply stepped into that river with human feet. You have felt the ache of separation from God. You have worried about judgment and the great chasm. You have asked whether Jesus warned us because hell is real or because fear sells sermons. Lift your eyes. Prayer in him is proof that God is not a solitary monarch. He is communion, and communion creates conversation. Short and clear, Jesus is not a lone deity acting alone. He is the Son who has always loved and been loved. Listen to his own memory of eternity. He will later say, "Father, glorify me in your own presence with the glory which I had with you before the world was made." He is not guessing. He is remembering. He is describing a home older than Eden, a radiance that does not dim. When he kneels in Galilee, he is behaving exactly as he did before galaxies spun. The posture is different. The relationship is the same. Picture a child walking into a throne room where a king smiles and stands. The child does not fear exile. He knows the path by heart. That is prayer for Jesus, not performance, presence, not negotiation, belonging. What does that mean for you? It means you were not created to survive on quick words before sleep. You were designed to live from presence, to let prayer become atmosphere. When you say Father, you step onto a road the Son has already walked. You are not knocking on a locked door. You are entering a room He has kept open with His own voice. Short and clear. Prayer is not a ritual to reach a distant God. Prayer is sharing the Son's nearness to the Father. So why did Jesus pray? Because love always speaks. Because obedience is born in conversation. Because glory is shared, not hoarded. If He did not pray, He would be less Himself. When He prays, He is revealing God's life to human eyes. Hold that image, an eternal river of communion entering time as a man who breathes, walks, and whispers, Father. The question now sharpens. If the Word is God and was with God, what happens when the Word takes on human flesh and steps into hunger, fatigue, and danger? Does the river slow or does it deepen? Keep watching. The light that warmed eternity is about to pass through skin. The stars still shimmer over the edge of creation. Light moves, and within that light there is voice, not one, but harmony. The Word is with God, and the Word is God. Yet the voice of the Father and the echo of the Son do not cancel each other. This is the mystery we glimpse but never contain. The eternal relationship between the Father, the Son, and the Spirit is not a doctrine to memorize. It is life itself. You've heard the word Trinity your whole life. But before it became a theological term, it was a rhythm, the pulse of divine love. In eternity, God was never silent. The Father spoke, the Son received, and the Spirit carried that communion like breath between them. It was not hierarchy, it was harmony. A love so complete that it needed no improvement, and yet so generous it overflowed into creation. That is why, when Jesus prayed, He wasn't performing. He was continuing the dialogue that never stopped. He wasn't pretending to talk to another being. He was expressing through human lips the same exchange that had existed beyond time. Here is the thesis. Jesus prayed to reveal relationship, not to resolve contradiction. In truth, in very truth, I tell you, the Son can do nothing of Himself. He can do only what He sees the Father doing. For whatever the Father does, the Son does likewise. John 5:19. Picture that moment. The Son doesn't act out of independence, but out of perfect sight. Every miracle, every word, every movement is born from what He sees in the Father's gaze. When He walks on water, it is because He has already seen the Father walking over chaos. When He raises the dead, it is because He has already seen the Father calling the lifeless into breath. Nothing in Jesus happens apart from that union. It's easy to think of God as distant, somewhere beyond the stars, unapproachable, silent. But Jesus destroys that illusion. He shows us that within God there is communion, a constant flow of giving and receiving. When He bows His head, He's not showing weakness. He's showing us how love moves within God Himself. The Father sends, the Son responds. The Father gives, the Son returns. The Father loves, the Son loves back endlessly. Prayer, then, becomes the heartbeat of divine reciprocity. And here's the wonder. He invites you into that same exchange. When you pray, you're not starting a conversation. You're joining one that has never stopped. You are stepping into a current that has been flowing since before creation. You are adding your breath to the wind that moved over the waters in Genesis. Prayer isn't the human attempt to reach upward. It is the echo of a voice that first called your name before you were formed. Pause and think of this. The one who sustains galaxies once knelt in the dust of His own creation to whisper, Father. That single word, born in eternity, spoken through human lungs, carries the whole story of heaven's love. It tells you that relationship, not solitude, is at the center of the universe. Short and clear. If God himself lives in communion, then isolation is never holy. Even the Almighty speaks, listens, and loves within himself. That's why Jesus prayed, not to fill silence, but to reveal the music behind all existence. Imagine the Son lifting his eyes to heaven, and in that gaze the same light that once shaped galaxies is reflected. The world sees a man speaking to the skies, but heaven sees the eternal rhythm continuing through human breath. You've asked, if he is God, why did he pray? But now the question changes. If the Son who is God chose to live in communion, how could we ever live without it? Hold that thought, because soon the eternal Word will step further into flesh. And when divine light enters human fragility, the sound of that eternal conversation will change. It will tremble, it will ache, and it will teach the world how God prays with a human voice. The light that once hovered over eternity now flickers through human skin. The voice that spoke galaxies into being now breathes through mortal lungs. The eternal Word has stepped inside time. He does not descend with thunder or celestial fire, but through the slow heartbeat of a child, through the trembling cry of an infant in Bethlehem. He enters the world not to display power, but to show what divine love looks like when it bends low. In heaven, communion was effortless. On earth, it would cost him everything. The same Son who once shared the Father's glory now wakes in the night to pray, his whispers carried by desert winds. He has not lost divinity, he has clothed it. He has not ceased to reign, he has chosen to kneel. Here is the thesis. The incarnation did not reduce God's glory, it revealed how far glory is willing to go for love. Though he was in the form of God, he did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even death on a cross. Philippians 2:6-8. This is kenosis, the holy emptying. The eternal stoops. The infinite learns fatigue. The all-sufficient becomes dependent on the breath he created. Each morning he wakes under the weight of flesh and chooses again to pray. Why? Because the Son who once communed face-to-face with the Father now walks the earth as man, and prayer becomes the bridge between glory remembered and glory restrained. Picture him stepping away from the crowd. Dust clings to his robe. The night air cools his skin. He lifts his face to the stars he once named and whispers, "Father." There is no performance in this voice, only hunger. He longs not for applause, but for alignment. He doesn't pray to gain strength. He prays to stay near. He doesn't seek to remind the Father who he is. He prays to remind humanity what nearness looks like. Short and clear, prayer was not Jesus' weakness. It was his way of being fully human without ceasing to be divine. In the wilderness, when hunger gnaws at his ribs and temptation prowls like a shadow, he prays. On mountains before dawn, when the world still sleeps, he prays. Between the cries of the sick and the weight of the crowds, he withdraws, not to escape, but to breathe again in the Father's rhythm. Luke tells us he would withdraw to desolate places and pray. Luke 5:16. The verb is continuous. He kept withdrawing. It was not an emergency ritual. It was oxygen. And that is what we have forgotten. We pray when we panic. He prayed because he loved. We cry out when the world collapses. He whispered even when all was calm. Prayer was his daily bread, not his last resort. Every sunrise became a meeting place between heaven and earth, between creator and creation, between the God who speaks and the man who listens. If you close your eyes, you can almost see it. A single figure at dawn, alone among the rocks of Galilee. His knees pressed into the earth he shaped, his breath rising into the sky he painted. Every exhale carries the weight of eternity, learning to breathe inside mortality. And in that stillness, the eternal river flows again, but now through the narrow channel of human vulnerability. This is where the mystery deepens. The one who sustains all things by the word of his power now sustains himself through communion. Hebrews says, in the days of his flesh, Jesus offered up prayers and supplications with loud cries and tears to him who was able to save him from death, and he was heard for his reverence. Hebrews 5:7. The Son cries. The Father listens. The Spirit moves. The dialogue of eternity continues, but now with tears, short and clear. The same hands that hold galaxies learn to fold in prayer. So when you see Jesus on his knees, do not imagine a God pretending to be human. See a God who loved enough to feel what we feel, to need what we need, to pray not because he lacked faith, but because he refused to live a day without the Father's voice. And here lies the doorway to a greater revelation, because the moment divine light wears the veil of flesh, prayer is no longer a symbol, it becomes survival. But if this is how the Son of God lived on earth, what happens when the shadow of death falls across his path? What happens when the one who prayed for strength now faces the hour of sorrow? When the river of communion meets the valley of agony, will it still flow? Keep watching. The garden waits. The wind moves softly over the desert. The horizon bleeds with the first hint of morning. Somewhere in that silence, before the birds wake, before the world remembers its noise, the sun rises from his rest. He steps away from the disciples still sleeping and walks alone into the dim light of dawn. His robe brushes the sand, his breath mingles with the wind, and as he kneels, the sky begins to glow. Rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place, and there he prayed. Mark 1:35. This is not an isolated verse. It is a window into his life. For Jesus, prayer was not crisis management, it was rhythm. Every new day began with silence, not strategy. Every decision was born from communion, not calculation. The Son lived as if time itself waited for his conversation with the Father before it dared to begin. Here is the thesis. Jesus prayed not to escape the world, but to align heaven and earth within himself. He had no need to find God. He was God, yet he still withdrew to listen. He knew the Father's will, yet he still sought his face. He possessed all power, yet he still chose dependence. Because prayer is not about ignorance, it's about intimacy. He did not kneel out of confusion, but out of love. He prayed because every heartbeat longed to stay synchronized with the Father's. Picture him at dawn, the chill in the air, the quiet hum of creation still waking. His eyes lift toward heaven, not to demand, but to delight. In that moment, he isn't preparing to perform miracles or to preach to crowds. He's simply remembering who he is, the beloved Son. That memory, that communion, was his oxygen. Short and clear. Jesus prayed because love always calls home. The crowds would come soon. They would press around him with needs, accusations, and expectations. The sick would reach for his robe. The Pharisees would sharpen their words. The disciples would misunderstand again. But before he faced the noise, he sought the silence. Before he healed the broken, he listened to the Father who heals. Before he fed thousands, he allowed himself to be fed by presence alone. This is the hidden rhythm of the kingdom. Strength before service, communion before confrontation. Jesus shows us that prayer is not a reaction, it's preparation. It does not start after the storm, it builds the shelter before the clouds arrive. He never waited for chaos to drive him to prayer. Prayer drove him into chaos with peace already anchored inside. Imagine the scene through the eyes of the disciples. They wake and realize he's gone again. They search the hills until they find him, alone, still and radiant with quiet strength. The sun catches his face. He stands, dusts his knees and smiles. "Let us go to the next towns," he says, "for that is why I came." Direction, clarity, peace, all born from prayer. We often wonder why our lives feel out of rhythm. Maybe it's because we wake to our plans before we wake to his presence. Jesus inverted the order, first presence, then purpose. He didn't begin with movement, he began with stillness. Because every miracle he performed was already finished in prayer before it appeared in action. Luke records it simply. He would withdraw to desolate places and pray. Luke 5:16. The verb would withdraw means he kept doing it. It was not habit for habit's sake, it was heartbeat, and every time he prayed, he was tuning his humanity to the frequency of divine will. Short and clear, heaven's alignment always begins with a whisper. You can almost feel the transition. The peace of dawn gives way to the tension of days ahead. The same hands that healed will soon tremble under the weight of betrayal. The same voice that calmed storms will soon whisper through tears. But before the agony, before the cross, before the silence of death, he prays, he aligns, he breathes. And as the sun climbs higher, you realize these early hours of solitude are not the end of his prayer life. They are the roots. Soon the tree will shake. Soon the wind will howl. Soon that still voice will rise again, but this time in a garden of shadows. Keep your eyes on that horizon, because the same dawn that once heard his whispers will soon witness his cries. The crowd presses close. Voices rise, hands reach, hope trembles in the air. And yet, before power flows, before anything happens, Jesus looks upward. He doesn't start with the need in front of him. He starts with the presence above him. Then he gives thanks. When 5 loaves and 2 fish rest in his hands, he doesn't see limitation. He sees opportunity for communion. "Father, I thank you that you have heard me." He speaks gratitude before the miracle because he already knows the Father's heart. He is not trying to convince heaven to act. He is agreeing with what heaven already intends to do. This is how the Son lives. Every public act begins in private alignment. When he multiplies bread, when he raises the dead, when he heals the blind, the pattern never changes. First the gaze, then the gratitude, then the glory. The miracle is only the echo of a prayer already answered in the secret place. "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around, that they may believe that you sent me." John 11:41-42. Even at the tomb of Lazarus, surrounded by tears and disbelief, Jesus prays aloud, not because the Father needs to hear, but because we do. He wants the world to see what heaven has always known. The Father and the Son are never apart. Every sigh, every glance, every whispered word flows between them as naturally as breath. The crowd hears a man praying. Heaven hears its own voice echoing through human lungs. That is the beauty of visible communion. Through the Son, the invisible becomes audible. Every father from his lips tears the veil a little more, until one day that veil will split completely. Short and clear, prayer is not preparation for the miracle, it is part of it. Gratitude is the seed of power. When the Son thanks the Father, creation listens. We often think faith begins when we see results, but for Jesus, faith was finished before the act began. His gratitude was prophecy. It declared that what the Father willed was already real in his heart. That's why the loaves multiplied, why the dead breathed, why the storms obeyed. Heaven recognized its own voice in the voice of the Son. And in all of this, obedience shines brighter than power. He doesn't pray to change the Father's will. He prays to embody it. Every miracle is obedience made visible. Every act of mercy is a reflection of an eternal conversation. The Father sends love, the Son releases it. The Father gives authority, the Son spends it. The Father speaks, the Son says, Amen. Look closely at that moment before each miracle. His eyes lift, always. Because for Jesus, nothing sacred happens without first remembering the source. It is not the hands that multiply bread, it is the communion that blesses it. Short and clear, every miracle begins with thank you. So the question is no longer why he prayed, but how we have forgotten to. How many moments pass before we lift our own eyes and whisper gratitude? The Son's eyes turn upward, not because the Father is distant, but because he is near, and soon, very soon, those same eyes will look upward again, but this time through tears, as heaven watches its own heart begin to break. Keep watching, because the hands that bless the bread will soon tremble under the weight of the cup. The night has no moon, only the whisper of olive leaves moving in the wind. The Son walks deeper into the garden. He has been here before, but never like this. Each step feels heavier, as if the air itself resists him. The same ground that once held his knees in peace will now drink his tears and blood. He tells his disciples, "My soul is deeply sorrowful, even unto death." Then he goes a little farther, alone. The world sleeps, heaven watches, and the Son begins to pray. Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me, yet not as I will, but as you will. Matthew 26:39. These are not words of weakness. They are the purest confession of trust ever spoken on earth. The Son is not fighting obedience. He is surrendering fully to it. The will of the Father has never been unclear. What shakes him now is not confusion, but the weight of what that will demands. Every sin, every shadow, every drop of human rebellion is about to fall upon him. Here is the thesis. In Gethsemane, Jesus shows that true prayer is not escape, it is surrender under unbearable weight. Luke writes that his sweat became like drops of blood falling to the ground, Luke 22:44. The pressure within him, the agony of divine purity touching human corruption, bursts the vessels beneath his skin. The eternal word bleeds through the human veil he once wove in Mary's womb. Still, he does not stop praying. When his closest friends sleep, he prays. When his heart breaks, he prays. When heaven is silent, he still whispers, Father. Short and clear. He doesn't pray to avoid the cross. He prays to embrace it. Imagine that moment, the garden silent except for his trembling voice. The Creator kneels on his own creation, asking if there is another way to redeem it. No lightning, no angelic chorus, only the sound of breath and weeping, yet in that silence something eternal happens. The Son's human will folds into the Father's divine purpose. The plan of redemption is sealed, not with signatures but with sweat. This is what prayer looks like when love costs everything. It doesn't seek to be rescued from obedience. It finds strength to continue within it. Heaven does not answer with removal, but with reinforcement. An angel appears, not to stop the pain, but to steady the hands that will soon carry it. You and I often ask why prayer doesn't remove the cup, but sometimes prayer is the strength to drink it. Jesus' agony does not change the outcome, it transforms the heart that walks toward it. In Gethsemane, the Son doesn't find escape. He finds resolve, short and clear. The garden was not where he lost, it was where he decided to win. The disciples still sleep, unaware that the greatest battle in history is being fought a few feet away, and it's fought on knees, not swords. The air thickens with the scent of earth and sweat. The footsteps of betrayal echo in the distance. He stands, wiping his face, his decision complete. Rise, let us go. The hour has come. The same mouth that trembled in anguish now speaks with calm fire. The cup will not pass, but he will drink it. And in the drinking, the world will be saved. Keep watching. The garden fades into torches and chains, and soon into the hill called Calvary. The sky turns black at noon. The ground trembles, dust rises like smoke, and the air tastes of iron and sorrow. 3 crosses stand against a silent storm, and on the center one hangs the Word made flesh. The hands that once blessed children now bleed. The lips that once whispered peace are cracked with thirst, and still he prays, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." Luke 23:34. The first words from the cross are not accusation, but intercession. He prays not for himself, but for the very ones who drove the nails. Even here, his dialogue with the Father continues. Love refuses to be silenced by suffering. Mercy speaks louder than pain. The darkness deepens. 3 hours of silence stretch across the earth, and then another cry breaks through the void. My God, why have you forsaken me?" Matthew 27:46. Here is the thesis. The prayer of the forsaken Son is not doubt. It is the sound of redemption being fulfilled. In that cry, he isn't losing faith. He is quoting the psalm that begins in anguish but ends in triumph. He is carrying our distance, our silence, our fear that God is gone. For the first time in eternity, the Father looks upon the Son and sees the sin of the world, not because he stopped loving him, but because love demanded justice, and justice required this cup to be finished. The Father's silence is not absence, it is sacrifice. The Son bears the separation we created so that communion could be restored forever. He becomes the great chasm, the bridge, and the way across it, all in one. Short and clear, the silence of the Father made room for the salvation of the world. Even as the crowd mocks, even as soldiers cast lots for his robe, Jesus keeps praying. To the thief beside him, "Today you will be with me in paradise." To the Father above him, "Into your hands I commend my spirit." Luke 23:43-46. He began his ministry in prayer. He ends it the same way. Every breath between Bethlehem and Calvary has been one long conversation. Now that conversation becomes a final surrender. At the sound of his last prayer, the veil of the temple tears from top to bottom. The wall that separated humanity from holiness collapses. The voice that seemed silenced becomes the key that opens heaven again. The earth shakes, graves open, and stillness falls. For a moment, it looks like the prayer has died with him. But prayer cannot die when spoken by eternal lips. It only descends to finish its work in the dark. Short and clear, the cross was not the end of his prayer, it was its loudest amen. As his body falls silent, creation itself holds its breath. The world waits in shadow, because what was finished in pain is about to rise in power. Keep watching. The silence of death is about to be broken by the voice that never stopped praying. The stone rolls away, the darkness retreats, and the voice that once cried in agony now breathes again. Light spills into the tomb like water breaking through a dam. The prayer that began in eternity and bled on Calvary rises with him, unbroken, undefeated, eternal. The risen Christ does not speak revenge, he speaks peace. "Peace be with you," he says to the trembling hearts behind locked doors. The same voice that said, "Forgive them," now says, "Fear not." His wounds shine like windows where grace now lives. Here is the thesis. The resurrection did not end the prayer. It transformed it into everlasting intercession. He no longer kneels in gardens or weeps in shadows. Now he stands in glory, still speaking your name. Hebrews declares, he always lives to make intercession for them. Hebrews 7:25. The Son who once cried through blood now prays through light. Every scar on his hands is a word spoken before the Father, proof that mercy has triumphed over judgment. Think of it. When you fail, when you fall silent, when your faith flickers, he prays. When the world feels too heavy and your words run dry, he prays. Even when you forget the sound of your own faith, his voice continues in your place. Romans says Christ Jesus is at the right hand of God, who indeed intercedes for us. Romans 8:34. Short and clear. Your prayers do not reach heaven alone, they arrive carried by his. In heaven there is no clock, yet every moment on earth echoes there because the Son stands before the Father with living memory of every tear, every wound, every plea. He does not speak from theory. He intercedes from experience. He knows hunger, loneliness, betrayal. He knows the silence you fear, and that's why his intercession is perfect. Even now, above all chaos, there is a voice that never fades. The same voice that calmed storms now speaks for you. The same heart that bled for humanity now beats beside the Father's throne. And with every heartbeat it says, still mine, still loved, still covered. Short and clear, the cross ended his suffering, not his speaking. The empty tomb proves that prayer is stronger than death. It cannot be sealed, silenced, or forgotten. And as long as he lives, and he lives forever, someone is praying for you. Keep watching, because the one who prays in glory also teaches us to pray on earth. The disciples had seen miracles. They had watched the dead rise, the blind see, the storms obey. But that wasn't what moved them to ask. It was the way he prayed, the way his voice softened, the way the air around him changed when he said, Father. So one day, as he finished praying, they whispered the only request that truly mattered, Lord, teach us to pray. Luke 11:1. He didn't hand them a formula. He opened his heart. When you pray, say, Our Father who art in heaven. Matthew 6:9. The same words that had carried him through loneliness, obedience, and the cross now became an invitation for them to share the same relationship. He was not giving them a ritual. He was giving them access. Here is the thesis. Jesus did not teach prayer as duty, but as inheritance. To call God Father was revolutionary. It meant the distance between heaven and earth had been closed. It meant the chasm sin had carved was now a bridge built by love. Through that single word, the Son shared his greatest treasure, his intimacy, short and clear. He didn't just teach words, he taught belonging. When he said, Thy kingdom come, he was teaching surrender. When he said, Thy will be done, he was teaching alignment. When he said, But forgive us, he was teaching mercy. Every phrase of the prayer reveals a heartbeat he lived. He never asked them to pray something he himself hadn't embodied. Think of how many times he showed it before he spoke it. Before choosing the 12, he prayed all night. Before healing the broken, he looked to heaven and gave thanks. Before the cross, he prayed for them, Holy Father, keep them in your name. Sanctify them in the truth. John 17:11-17. Even in his final hours, his concern was not himself but his own, those who would believe through their word. This is the legacy he left, a way of life where prayer becomes presence, not repetition, not noise, a rhythm of heart that connects earth to eternity. When we say, Our Father, we are stepping into the same communion that shaped the Son's life. We are speaking words older than creation, words that still echo around the throne. Short and clear, prayer is not about reaching God. It's about remembering you are never apart from him. And just as he once said, when you pray, say. Now the Spirit whispers, keep saying. Because the more you speak with the Father, the more you begin to sound like the Son. Keep listening. Because the voice that once taught us to pray is still calling us home, to kneel, to breathe, to live. The garden is silent again, but now it's not the silence of fear, it's the quiet after victory. The air carries memory, footsteps on holy ground, prayers whispered through tears, blood that spoke louder than guilt. And yet, beyond all of it, the voice remains. From eternity to the cradle, from the cradle to the cross, from the cross to the throne, the same voice has never stopped calling, Father. That single word holds the universe together. It was the first sound before creation and the last word before glory. And it still waits for an echo from you. Prayer was never meant to be a moment. It was meant to be a life. When the Son said, "Follow me," he wasn't leading toward applause or comfort. He was leading back into conversation, the kind that began before time and never truly ends. Short and clear, you were made for this voice. Every prayer you've ever whispered into the dark has been heard. Every question, every tear, every silence, none of it was wasted. Because before you called, he had already answered. Before you searched, he had already seen you. The story isn't over. It still breathes in every quiet room where someone kneels. It still trembles in every heartbeat that dares to believe again. The same hands that once reached toward heaven now reach toward you. The same spirit that hovered over the waters now waits to hover over your life. If you could stand in the stillness of eternity for one moment, you would see it clearly. Every breath is borrowed from prayer. Every heartbeat is a reminder that heaven still speaks. Every soul that turns back toward God adds one more voice to the eternal conversation that never truly ended on the cross. It simply changed tone. So when you kneel, you are not starting something new. You are stepping into something ancient. You are answering a call that has been echoing since before light was born. And somewhere beyond time, beyond pain, beyond every unanswered question, the Son still prays. Not from the dust, not from agony, but from glory. His eyes are on you. His hands still bear the story, and his voice, steady and full of grace, still whispers the same invitation: kneel and live. Maybe you're still listening with that quiet ache inside. That feeling that somewhere along the way your voice faded. Maybe you used to pray, but life got loud. Maybe the silence felt too long. Maybe you thought heaven had forgotten your name. But tonight, you've heard it again. That same voice that called the stars into being, that whispered in Gethsemane, that bled on the cross, and that rose from the tomb. It just called your name. This is not coincidence. You didn't stumble onto this message by chance. You were led here. Because heaven still remembers you. And Jesus, the Son who prays without ceasing, is still speaking your name before the Father. He's not waiting for your perfection. He's waiting for your presence. And right now, wherever you are, you can whisper it again. Father, I'm here. That's all it takes to return. If this journey touched something in you, if it helped you breathe again, believe again, or pray again, then help us keep this voice echoing. Click the super thanks heart below this video. Not as payment, not as donation, but as partnership in purpose. Every gift there fuels new research, new stories, new chances for others to encounter the same presence you just felt. When you click that heart, you're helping us whisper the gospel to millions who've forgotten how to listen. And if this message has spoken to your heart, comment below, "I hear his voice." Let that be your public confession of faith and remembrance. Then please share this video with someone who's struggling to find words in prayer. You never know whose silence might be waiting for this sound. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Bible Stories and Mysteries and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next revelation, the next encounter, the next story that pulls eternity a little closer. The same God who spoke in the garden is still speaking now. The same Son who prayed on the cross is still praying for you. And every time you listen, every time you kneel, every time you whisper, "Father," the story begins again. So breathe, kneel, and live.